being in the seat is tough, and being at FDA is tough, and the stakes are really high, and the scrutiny is really high, and one misstep can lead to a lot of consequences, and I think we're seeing that.
Hello, and welcome to FDA Watch. I'm Wayne Pines. We're the only independent, nonpartisan national forum dedicated to discussing the latest developments and issues about FDA. And as you can tell from the front pages of the newspapers every day, there are headlines every day. I want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can do so. Go to fdawatch.net. That's fdawatch.net. And that will enable you to receive an email whenever a new episode is released, including our bonus episodes. In this episode, we're going to focus on the latest hot button issues in pharma. We have two outstanding guests. You'll meet them in just a moment, but let me go to the headlines first. From the Pharma desk, Vinay Prasad is back at CBER. 2 weeks ago, he submitted his resignation, said he did not want to be a distraction because of the Sarepta episode. But FDA Commissioner Makary asked him to come back, and he did. And so he's returning to lead the Biologics Division of FDA, CBER. During his earlier tenure, he just joined the agency a few months ago. He tightened COVID-19 vaccine eligibility. He increased scrutiny of gene therapies. He dealt with the Sarepta situation. And now he is back. So hopefully that will provide some stability in CBER as well as across the agency. From the device desk, indications are there's a lot of reporting about troubles with FDA's new AI tool, Elsa, which is being used to streamline medical device reviews and approvals in addition to drug reviews, in addition to being used across the agency. According to reports, FDA staff have noted that Elsa is, and I'm using the CNN word, I'll use the word hallucinating entire studies. We all know that AI is not 100% reliable. The chief AI officer at FDA, Jeremy Walsh, said recently that the agency is working on improving the AI tool. We'll continue to follow AI, and we'll discuss AI later in this podcast. Second on the device side, Michelle Tarver, who is the director of CDRH and who has been probably, I'll use the word stable, the most stable center director since the beginning of this year in terms of her continuity. She offered some insights recently publicly in what's on her list of things to do in the coming year. She anticipates improvement in the CDRH portal by increasing automation of the intake process, providing enhanced interactive review communications capabilities, and expanding the progress tracking function. She also said that the pre-submission program hit a record in fiscal 2023 and 2024, and the center plans to enhance the efficiency and clarity through a more standardized tiered approach to Q submissions tailored by submission type and development phase. We're going to have in a few weeks a special session on a special podcast on devices. From the food desk, FDA and USDA, the Department of Agriculture, recently published a joint request for information to help the agencies define ultra-processed foods. That's obviously been a top priority of the Secretary of HHS as well as the Commissioner of FDA. FDA noted that a food currently qualifies as ultra-processed based on things like the use of certain ingredients, certain substances such as emulsifiers, industrial processing technologies, as well as packaging. And we'll keep an eye on this because obviously how the agency defines ultra-processed foods is very important in terms of future regulatory programming. And then finally, on the cosmetics desk, anxiety was recently expressed over tariffs that affect South Korea. American shoppers are reportedly stockpiling South Korean beauty products, according to the Associated Press. The reason for that is because of the tariffs. It wound up that the U.S. is going to impose a 15% tariff on imported South Korean goods. Originally, it was supposed to be 25%. U.S. consumers represent a growing market in the Korean beauty space. The U.S. imported $1.7 billion worth of South Korean cosmetics last year. That was a significant rise over 2023. So we'll continue to monitor the potential impact of tariffs, not only on cosmetics, but on all products across the FDA spectrum. Let's meet our guests, make brief introductions. Deb Autor is CEO of Healthcare Innovation Catalyst. She served as Deputy Commissioner of FDA and Director of Compliance at CDER. She's also served at AstraZeneca and Mylan. She is now the chair of the FDA Alumni Association. She has more than 30 years experience in the FDA field and is very, very well known in this area. Welcome to FDA Watch, Deb.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for having me.
Also joining us today is Dr. Paul Offit. If you've been following vaccines for the last few decades, you've seen his name. He's director of the Vaccine Education Center and professor of pediatrics in the Division of Infectious Diseases at CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's a professor of vaccinology at the Perelman School of Medicine at Penn and an internationally recognized expert in the fields of virology and immunology. Welcome to FDA Watch, Paul.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I want to start out with a question, as you might have guessed, about vaccines. Daily front page news. RFK Jr. just canceled $500 million in research. Starting with Paul, then turning to Deb, I want to focus not on the past, but on the future. What's your perspective on what's going on right now with regard to these evolving vaccine decisions and policies? But more importantly, where do you think this is headed?
Well, I'm worried. I mean, we have a Secretary of Health and Human Services. He basically eliminated the $500 million that were being earmarked for BARDA to move forward on mRNA vaccine research. What's most worrisome is why. He gave you reasons why. He said it's because the mRNA technology has been disappointing, that the mRNA COVID vaccines, that the risks of those vaccines outweigh the benefits, that the vaccine itself sort of created pressure on the virus to mutate essentially away from the recognition by vaccine-induced antibodies, which is all wrong. I mean, he said that the vaccines have caused antigenic shift in the virus, which is also absolutely not true. Just for reference purposes, SARS-CoV-2 virus rose in China in late 2019. The initial strain was the ancestral strain, or Wuhan 1 strain. Very quickly, that virus mutated to a much more contagious variant that didn't have a Greek letter designation. It was called D614G, that then spread across Asia, spread across Europe, mutated to become the Alpha variant, mutated to become the Delta variant. That all happened without any vaccines being available. So that's what this virus does. And then he went on to say that by choosing a single protein technology, that we have basically created this continued sort of moving away from vaccine-induced immunity, which also isn't true. He said that essentially a whole-killed viral vaccine would be better. Well, China had a whole-killed viral vaccine. It wasn't better than the mRNA vaccine. So
what I want to do is shift into the future. Where is this going?
Here's where I think it's going. He's already hired a law firm from Arizona to help him reconfigure the vaccine injury compensation program. And I think what he'll do then is he will add certain disorders to the list of compensable injuries, or he may take certain vaccines out of protection by that program and just leave them open to civil litigation. And we're right back to where we were in the 1980s, when we had 18 compensate-made vaccines in 1980, and by the end of the decade, we had 4. And it wasn't that those companies lost litigation in civil court. It's that it was enormously expensive to defend it. And so they left it. And what that taught me at the time, because I was certainly a fellow and then attending physician at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, was that these companies were willing to leave that industry because it's generally a fragile market. I think it's less than 10% of what they do. It's something you give once or a few times in a lifetime. And I worry for vaccines in this country.
Deb, I want to ask you about the impact of all this about vaccines on FDA and on CBER. You spent many decades there. What do you see the impact being on FDA?
I wanted to approach it actually first from the question of how will this maneuver through FDA. The commissioner has been talking more about harmonizing CBER and CDER. And that makes a lot of sense, I think, for therapeutics. I think an interesting thing for FDA watchers to keep an eye on is, does this lead to some kind of structural change in the agency, which then has an impact on vaccines? So you could imagine the therapeutics and CBER and CDER being combined, and things like vaccines, blood banking regulation, allergenics being split off into a separate unit. And again, people are speculating about this. I can't say whether that will happen or not. But I think if it does, it's reasonable to then think about how does that dovetail with the future that Paul is foreseeing for vaccines, because it would obviously have a separate position for someone who would just be in charge of review and approval for vaccines. In terms of the impact on FDA now, I think it's an example of the broader picture at the agency right now, where there have been vast departures in leadership, and there have been a lot of losses in personnel, and morale's pretty low. Workload is pretty high. A lot of things are kind of coming down from on high as new policies that may or may not have been generally take the rank and file by surprise. So I think there's going to also be an impact on the people who choose to work and stay at the agency, and obviously that will have an effect on reviews going forward, including in vaccines.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you to do a deeper dive into that with regard to the impact that you see. We're 8 months into the new year, into the new administration. Where do you see this headed in terms of CDER and CBER and drug reviews? And if you want to talk about device reviews as well, it's CDRH.
So I would say there are a lot of people who've left the agency, for certain. The numbers vary a little bit, but the closest I have is about 1,900 who received RIF notices. Of those, the commissioner has said several hundred were brought back. About 1,200 staff who accepted early retirement packages. But that hasn't been the end of the departures. CDER lost 380 employees in the first half of 2025 and hired 18, compared to the same period in 2024 when it lost 130 and hired over 240. Now, that may include some of the early retirements, not clear. And another fact I saw recently is that about a third of the reviewers in the breast, gynecologic, and genitourinary cancers group have recently resigned. So I think there's a big impact on the availability of qualified personnel to do reviews. And I think I see that with my clients on a day-to-day basis, that you have reviewers who are less able to interact, they're overloaded, they're maybe not feeling so good, morale is not great. There's also been a fair amount of loss of leadership and also some drain in the policy side, which makes it much harder to deal with difficult issues and to escalate and to figure out how to resolve complex challenges. And this is CDER, CBER, and CDRH. So I foresee that continuing to be an issue. Unfortunately, this isn't the time, I think, when a lot of really qualified people are saying, I want to go work at FDA. It doesn't seem like that is a necessarily advisable decision for people in their careers right now.
Right. So again, looking to the future, how does that evolve? Will the agency continue to be in a position where there will be, delays and there will be problems, or will the agency be able to recover? I'll use that word in terms of what has happened so far.
I think that the agency will certainly be heavily impacted. I don't think the sky will fall, honestly. I think that There's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of loss of personnel. The commissioner is adamant that the trains are running on time and user fee goals will be met. I think that's probably largely true, although I think the agency has historically exceeded its user fee goals pretty significantly over time, because the user fee goal might be, for example, 90% of reviews done on time, and the agency might be hitting 98, 99%. I think that what you will see is fewer people available to do just as much work, people less invested than they've historically been feeling when the agency really had an incredible esprit de corps because of the dedication to the mission of public health. And I think in the long run, that's going to have a detrimental impact on the agency's review and other functions. I don't think the sky will fall. I do think the pendulum will start to swing back at some point in the future, but I don't think it'll be business as usual either.
Paul, let me play devil's advocate with you for a second. What I think I hear the leadership of the agency saying, or the new leadership saying, is it's time to re-examine the vaccine schedule. It's time to look at some of these vaccines and their impact. Macari has said, we need to make sure that if we approve the COVID vaccine, that a 12-year-old girl might be taking it for the next 80 years or so on an annual basis. Just react to what they are saying specifically with regard to the need to re-examine where we are, because as I'm sure you'll agree, the clinical data is old with regard to some of these vaccines, and the basis for the immunization schedule, it's been in existence for a long time. And is it still the immunization schedule that works in 2025?
Okay, so what I hear when I hear those points being brought up is I hear the anti-vaccine movement. So here's why. The anti-vaccine movement's principal concern is that children get too many vaccines too soon, and that is somehow weakening or overwhelming their immune system. That's what I hear in that. What they've also talked about, at least for the ACIP, looking at the hepatitis B birth dose. Do we really need that? Of course, you want to always be reevaluating it, but do we really need to? Let me take a step back. SARS-CoV-2 virus is going to be circulating for the rest of our lives. There are 4 strains of human coronavirus that are circulating. One entered the human population in the late 1700s, another in the late 1800s. The other 2 are more recent. But let's assume this virus is with us for a while. By the time you're 6 months of age, you're fully susceptible to this virus. 3, we know that children are getting hospitalized and dying from this virus. So why do we need to say we need to step back? All people are arguing for, and this is what the ACIP argued for when we still had an ACIP, was that we had a routine recommendation for children, but we don't. So I just see things being turned on its head. And I don't trust the current ACIP to evaluate this, because I think that they are just being brought in because they have a history of anti-vaccine activity. And it's not just me. I mean, I think medical societies, professional societies are no longer trusting the ACIP. I think we are in a tough spot, Wayne.
But again, I'm going to ask the question: is there anything fundamentally wrong with the concept of taking a fresh look at it based on 2025 standards? And I don't know. I'm going to ask you later how you would do that if it were done. But how is there anything the matter fundamentally with taking a fresh look at it? Again, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I want to get to the bottom. I understand the politics of it. The politics is one thing, and the statements made by RFK over the years is one thing. But the underlying question I'm asking you is there anything the matter with looking at it all again?
I don't know what that means. I mean, what does it mean when they say they want to take a fresh look at the current schedule? I mean, so children currently receive 14 vaccines to prevent 14 different diseases in the first few years of life, an additional 3 vaccines by the time you're late adolescence. When a vaccine is added to the schedule, and Deb knows this better than I do, but when a vaccine is added to a schedule, you have to do concomitant use studies. You have to show that the vaccine doesn't interfere with the immunogenicity profile of vaccines that would be given at the same time, and vice versa, and the same thing regarding safety. So those concomitant use studies, of which there are hundreds, essentially show you that this is a well-forged schedule, a well-hewn schedule. So what exactly are we looking at? Are we looking at, do we still need a polio vaccine? Are we looking at, do we still need a diphtheria vaccine? Is that what they mean? Yes, is the answer to those questions, because that virus, polio or the bacteria diphtheria, still is in this world. I think we all should agree, as the American Academy of Pediatrics does, that children who've never been vaccinated or are naturally infected should be vaccinated. And then, do they need a yearly vaccine? The ACIP was on the verge of saying no. They were on the verge of saying only these 4 high-risk groups should get a yearly vaccine. I think a 12-year-old who's been primarily vaccinated or naturally infected probably doesn't, and is otherwise healthy, doesn't need a vaccine until that person enters into a high-risk condition. That's the answer.
Deb, let me ask you whether you have any view on that.
Well, I'll just add one point, which is I spent a lot of time, Wayne, with companies in the boardroom, in the C-suite, talking to people. And I do think that the other side of this equation is, does it pay to be in the vaccine business? And I think Paul talked about what happened several decades ago. And that would be my concern, is that companies just will say, too much risk, not enough incentive, and there won't be development of new vaccines, or at least it'll slow down quite a bit. And as we saw in COVID, I don't know about you, but I was in my house waiting for a vaccine to come out, and I was very, very grateful when it did.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Deb, and ask you a little bit more about what's going on at CBER and CDER. The Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program, which he says is designed to expedite drug reviews. How do you see that faring?
Well, it's fascinating. It's a different animal. In some ways, the National Priority Voucher Program sort of repeats other kinds of accelerated review programs out there, whether that's real-time oncology review program, for example. But what's different here is a few things. One, the criteria for the vaccine. So they've announced 4 criteria: addressing a health crisis in the US, bringing potential innovative therapies to the American people, addressing a large unmet medical need, or increasing affordability. Those are very, very different. What's also different is the process. Not quite clear what the process is going to be, but right now it's submit a 350-word statement that will be considered. Another thing that's different is that the vouchers are not rewarded to a specific drug, but to a company. And that raises really fascinating considerations of what you have to offer as a reason for getting this voucher, and then what you can use it for. And there is somewhere in the Q&A a question about whether these vouchers are transferable. Keep in mind that prior priority review vouchers have sold easily for $150 million from one company to another. These are not transferable. However, they will remain valid through changes in company ownership. So what does that mean? If a company acquires a voucher because they promise to develop an innovative therapy needed for the American people, they have a sort of niche product, and then once they have the voucher, then they're acquired by a large pharma company that has another product that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster that they want to expedite. So I guess I would say about this program is I see it as the agency looking for creative ways to get people to fulfill the administration's priorities. I understand that. And they've been very, very creative, and it's not really clear exactly how it's going to play out. But I do think for those of us who've been in this industry for a very long time, this is certainly a process that is atypical and raises a lot of questions about whether it can be implemented in an even-handed, public health oriented kind of way.
What do you think about the concept, the concept, and that is that there would be one day where everybody involved with a particular product who was knowledgeable about the data would meet and presumably sit around a table and evaluate it all, and thereby save a lot of time.
Right. The supposed tumor-style review board, something to that effect. That doesn't bother me that much, in the sense that what this really is a rolling submission. right? We're talking about people submitting their CMC and tox work and everything else up front, and then the last bit of clinical work comes in, and then everybody gets together at a table. So it's not as if we're all sitting down for the first time, reviewing this file and making a decision on the fly. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just a way of taking what's normally done and doing it more quickly. That's fine. The question is, who gets it? What do they use it for? Why are they getting it? Who's deciding who's getting it?
Right. Uh, Again, I'm shifting gears. We've all been reading about this Sarepta situation, allegedly, resulted in the resignation of Dr. Prasad. Uh, Again, I'm not sure we'll ever know the full narrative there. So, Deb, what do you? I'm going to ask you a very general question. What do you make of it? What's going on there?
Well, I don't think any of us totally know all the facts, Wayne, so I'm going to be a little bit uh, tepid in what I'm willing to say here. But I think that it's an illustration of the what's at stake in FDA decision making. And there are so many stakeholders and such huge impacts to what the agency does. And in this case, it seemed like things may have gone uh, forward without full consideration. It seemed like very quickly the agency backtracked and said, "Oh no, that the death that they were linking was not a linked death." And I think that being in the seat is tough, and being at FDA is tough, and the stakes are really high, and the scrutiny is really high, and one misstep can lead to a lot of consequences, and I think we're seeing that.
Right, right. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking with Deb Autor and with Paul Offit. Talked about vaccines. Talk about what's going on at CDER and CBER. Paul, I want to ask you a very specific question, and this is, more for people as patients rather than as members of the FDA community. Where are we with COVID? And should the COVID vaccine be restricted to not people, anybody can get it, but in terms of reimbursement and in terms of practicality and in terms of policy, should it be only for people who are immunocompromised or over 65, or should we all? I will admit I'm over 65, but should everybody be getting the COVID vaccine as we did in 2021, 22, 23, 24?
So the goal of the vaccine is to prevent serious illness. Meaning keep you out of the hospital, keep you out of the intensive care unit, keep you out of the morgue. That's the goal of the vaccine. So then the question becomes, who are those people? Who are the people who are getting hospitalized? Now, I think anybody who has never been naturally infected or never been vaccinated, we're talking about young children, should get a vaccine. Well, how about beyond that? The yearly vaccine. Does everybody need a yearly vaccine? Most countries in this world don't recommend a yearly vaccine for everyone. We have up until now, and when the ACIP was meeting back in April, I think they were on the verge of doing what virtually every other country in this world does, which is target high-risk groups. People who are pregnant, people who are immune compromised for whatever reason, people who have high-risk medical conditions like chronic lung disease or chronic heart disease, and people who are more mature Americans, so people who are like over 75. Certainly, I think those groups benefit, especially older individuals. So those people can reasonably get a yearly vaccine. But I think that we, for too long, really stuck with this notion of everybody over 6 months should get a yearly vaccine. We were one of the few countries that did that. That's not what the World Health Organization recommended either. So I think that's where we are with COVID. But know this: COVID will be with us for a long time. We can ignore it, but it's not going to go away. And people, it still can make people sick or die. So we should protect ourselves.
Deb, again, I'm shifting gears with you. You have clients who have had challenges now in the drug approval process. You mentioned them before. What should a company do? if there is a delay in a PDUFA date, if there is a delay in setting up a meeting, what do you do?
It's a great question, Wayne. I mean, I think first, a question I'd start with is what should a company do to sort of navigate the agency in this environment? And so, what we are often advising our clients is be as prepared as you possibly can, even more so than you ever did in the past. Make sure when you interact with the agency, you do so strategically, carefully, well prepared, knowing all your facts. Use programs like breakthrough programs so that you get more interaction with the agency. Keep records of your interaction, because if personnel change, you want to be able to have a written record of prior discussions that you've had, and keep an eye on changing approaches as you go along. If things get delayed, or a PDUFA date is missed, or a GDUFA date, or a MDUFA date, or a PSUFA date, there's not much you can do about it other than make sure that you're doing the best you can to provide the information that you need and engaging productively with your reviewers and trying to get there. I mean, the reality is the agency has control over that. And I would say if there's some kind of dispute you have with the agency, dispute resolution processes have always been long and cumbersome, and I think that's gotten more challenging with personnel changes or personnel losses. So I guess the best defense is a good offense, I guess is what I would say. Be very, very, very thorough and mindful and careful and strategic about the packages you put in and the discussions you have with the agency.
Are you optimistic about the ability of the agency to recruit the best people?
No, is the short answer. I just think this is a tough time to be a federal employee to begin with. I think a lot of people became federal employees in the past because they were mission driven and they saw it as a great opportunity. And yes, they were making less than they could have in the private sector, but that was the trade off we were willing to make. And I think a lot of people also saw it as a secure job. They didn't want to be subject to the whims of the private sector and feel like they could lose their job any day and then be back on the job market. And at this point, a lot of that has changed. And so it's tough for someone who's coming out who has many opportunities to say, you know what, the one thing I want to do is I want to go to that place where people denigrate me, I could get fired, and the mission that I want to accomplish isn't that respected. I think that's going to have an impact, sadly. I think there'll still be smart people. There's still great jobs. It's a great agency. They do amazing things, but it's a tough time to sign up.
Final area I want to cover is AI. AI, obviously the future. Paul, how how does AI affect the vaccine environment and the vaccine situation? And I'm going to ask the same question to Deb on a broader scale in terms of how it affects FDA and the products that it regulates and its use. But in terms of vaccines specifically, Paul, what does AI do?
We'll see, but I think it may make it so that we are better able to construct vaccine platforms that give us the best immunity for not only antibody responses but also for T helper cell and cytotoxic T cell responses to identify the sort of the best combination of all. I mean, you could argue that the mRNA vaccines were really vaccines to induce primarily antibody responses. I mean, you could have argued that we could have also included, for example, not only the mRNA that coded for the spike protein, but also mRNA that coded for the nuclear protein, which is sort of the major site recognized by cytotoxic T cells, which Dan Baruch at Harvard called, the unsung hero of this pandemic, cytotoxic T cells. I mean, so I think that's where I think AI can potentially help us, but I'm sure there are far more reasons than just that.
Deb, on a broader scale, how does AI affect the agency, both in terms of its use of AI across the scale? You were deputy commissioner, so I'm not just talking about CDER and CBER. I'm talking about across the entire agency. It's been identified when Dr. Califf was commissioner. He said it was his number one priority to bring AI in. So again, same question for you. How does it affect the agency as a whole and individual product categories?
Yeah. So AI is obviously having a huge impact on pretty much everybody and everything at this point in time. From an FDA perspective, I would highlight a couple things. Obviously, first is the agency's rollout of Elsa, which is the AI tool that has been rolled out industry-wide. And you mentioned this in your headlines, Wayne. Elsa has had some reports of challenges and hallucinations. So Elsa is basically Claude 3.5, as I understand it. It was trained on internal FDA documents, and as of April 2024. So it's being rolled out. Now, when I've talked to people at the agency, they say it's more AI in the loop at this point. It's probably not all that different than any of the rest of us using a chatbot. And I think that's fine as long as it's used appropriately, as long as people recognize the limitations. If it's asked to do a review and come up with a conclusion and nobody's double checking it, well, obviously that's going to be a no-no. If it's asked to review documents and provide a summary and that's pressure tested, I think that could be valuable. Obviously, the agency has to find a way to get in there one way or the other and to start using AI. And I think Elsa is a good first step as long as it's used appropriately. And I understand it's still voluntary as well. People are able to use it when they want to, and I'm sure it can be useful. I don't know about you. I use chatbots all the time. I think they're amazing tools. You just have to know what you're getting, and you have to know it's not always right. I think the ultimate goal is real-time FDA, which is real-time application reception, real-time review, real-time approvals, real-time inspections, real-time surveillance. This is me. This is from FDA's chief AI officer. And I hope the agency can get there. I hope it gets there deliberately and carefully and understanding the implications of all of that. Same is true for all of us. In terms of FDA's regulation of AI, again, there's a lot to be done there. I think that on the device side, and I know you had a whole series on AI and devices, I think that most of the devices that have been approved, maybe 98%, are basically fixed algorithms. They're not learning systems. So to be able to get into generative AI in the medical device space, there's a lot to be figured out, but the agency's really not there. So to say we're improving AI devices, yeah, sort of, but not really fully utilizing AI capabilities. I think AI in drug development and discovery has incredible opportunity and probably is kind of the least threatening from a regulatory standpoint, as long as it's used to identify candidates and then those candidates are taken through relatively normal approval processes. I think that AI in manufacturing and AI in quality still has a long way to go, and there's a lot to be done to get to the point where industry feels like it knows how FDA is going to address it so that industry isn't held back. Because right now, I think there's a lot of question in industry of how do we use a system in a regulated space when FDA doesn't quite have an approach yet to regulating it. So I think there's also a lot of work to be done to really fulfill the potential of AI in all of those spaces.
Okay. Well, let me thank you both for being guests on our podcast today. Very insightful, very, very valuable. You both bring, obviously, an enormous amount of expertise. I'm going to turn briefly to our resource link segment. We provide our listeners with some valuable links they may want to check out on our website, fdawatch.net. No need to write anything down. Just go to fdawatch.net and you can access some of these links. First, with regard to drugs, FDA issued a press release which said it will be requiring major changes to opioid labeling, emphasize risks, support more informed decision-making, they say. This comes following a meeting in May that discussed opioids. Click our link to read more about the labeling changes in medical device area. There was a recent Forbes op-ed which provided a view on the FDA's guidance on AI-enabled medical devices. The person who wrote the op-ed, Christian Espinoza, who is founder of Blue Goat Cyber, explains why the agency's guidance may be prompting a bit of havoc in the device space. He noted that the guidance focuses too much on complex AI, that the frameworks don't necessarily align with less complex AI machine learning models, and that the FDA's approach doesn't fully address the total product lifecycle. You can, again, get this op-ed through the link on our website. In the food area, FDA recently made its expanded decision tree tool a methodology for assessing chemical toxicity and risk in food for systemic post-market safety reevaluation available to the scientific community for its consideration. FDA describes the tool as a modernized version of the original Kramer decision tree, which has been widely used by scientists to provide an estimate of a new chemical's toxic potential. We link to the FDA's page on this, so check it out. And finally, in the cosmetics area, members of the House of Representatives recently reintroduced what's called the Safer Beauty Bill package, which is a 4-bill initiative designed to address safety concerns in cosmetics. And according to media reports, the proposed legislation would expand beyond MOCRA, give FDA more regulatory authority, and introduce more requirements on cosmetics. Again, check that out at fdawatch.net. So again, let me thank Deb and Paul for being such great guests. We'd like to thank our podcast creator and executive producer, Michael Levin Epstein, our assistant producer, Sam Hoffmeister. If you want to be a marketing partner or a sponsor or just comment on the show, you can contact us at info@fdawatch.net. That's info@fdawatch.net. Finally, if you're so inclined to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, please do so. It really does make a difference. And remember to follow us and to subscribe. Make sure that other people who might be interested in the podcast also subscribe. It's free, and it assures that you won't miss a single episode of FDA Watch. And as we say at the end of every episode of FDA Watch, if you really want to watch what FDA is doing, listen to FDA Watch.